Brian, it's an extremely exciting time in the world of AI. However, you've got this feeling that the regulation, innovation, delicate dance is kind of in the background. How do companies start to navigate that?
It is. It's a very tricky little dance that they have to run, particularly when, we are at a point where the legislation is just about to be signed. So, there are a lot of our clients in the background have been watching this for quite some time, and they're quite well versed in the ins and outs of the AI Act, but they're not yet ready to commit to, let's say, what their position may be, because they're waiting to see what the final position will be in the legislation. Now, we all know that, let's say, the big picture pieces of the legislation, like the regime for high-risk AI, that's not going to change. How thresholds work may slightly alter, but the overall regime of the technology will be regulated like a product in the future is absolutely not going to change. So you have clients who are trying to perform that balance. They're looking 2 to 3 years into the future, and they're thinking, what does my AI product roadmap look like? And how might that roadmap map onto the technology? And where are my pain points, and what do I need to do now to prepare for that?
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective since June, where you had the kind of top 7 AI companies in the US come together and kind of work out kind of a pact in terms of certain things that they're going to be very, very accountable for, such as additional testing, making sure that it's fit for purpose when they're bringing it out, and be very cognizant of that. And then thereafter, you've had an additional 7 firms such as Palantir join within that. So we're seeing people taking it very, very seriously on regulation. How important is for harmonization that you've got different types of areas collectively all singing off the same hymn sheet, rather than a mishmash of different laws and regulations?
Yeah, I think that there's a number of things going on there. I think the European legislation approach is a hardline approach, for want of a better word or phrase. The US and the relationship it has with the UK and broader global relations, and more of a softer, principles-based approach. The thing about it is that, the notion of trustworthy AI has kind of universal principles, some of which you kind of alluded to there, and they cross over between the two. So in one sense, the EU is looking to set the global standard on, let's say, to a level of detail, what good looks like. But at a global level, with G7 processes and codes, etc., you're seeing more principles-based approach to the regulation of the area coming in. The EU is of the view that, within time, theirs will become the gold standard, and they point to things like GDPR to give an example of how this has worked in the past. Only time will tell, of course, but I think, from the perspective of our clients and what people are doing in the innovation sector, they would love to see some sort of a harmonized approach, and I think we're very much in the infancy of what's happening here, but what's happening at a global level is helping.
Yeah, and having that kind of privacy by design, and you kind of have that foundation when you're actually introducing it across a population of 450 billion, you feel like at least that foundation is covered, so that people are going to start to trust this and engage in it, and that's suddenly where things can escalate, and people can feel a lot more comfortable making those purchases.
Absolutely, and that's the whole goal of this project by the EU. It was around April 2018 when they really ramped this up, and they brought out their recommendations for trustworthy AI. The whole project is, the EU AI project is termed trustworthy AI, and the approach is to be able to give confidence to the market that what they are engaging with, when it comes to artificial intelligence, they can trust it, because it's like, the EU saying to them, we've got your back, we've looked after this, you can trust this.
Yeah, in the simplest terms, for other countries that are a little bit behind on this, they can see this framework and think, well, this is a very, very well thought out framework. We can actually look to use this as a benchmark for how we actually progress.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised in a number of years' time to see some countries following suit. You had examples previously with GDPR where people followed the framework of the EU.
I recently spoke to Adis Mohan from National Safety Authority in Ireland, and he talked to me about how the first couple of years you will have this set in place, but it's going to be ever evolving. As regulation changes, technology changes, all these things, it's kind of the cheese is always moving. So this is a good starting point.
It is, and the work that he is doing with the NSAI and what they are doing when it comes to standards, that's what they're working on. They're working on creating I suppose you would say, the easily readable aspect of compliance, which is the partner to the legislation. And again, from having worked in-house myself, I understand that teams can't read legislation. Again, it's an incredibly tricky thing to do if you don't have that knowledge. But teams are well used to reading standards. Everybody knows how to implement an ISO standard, and there's a lot of supports out there for doing that. So the work that the NSAI is doing is incredibly important, because it's almost like a translation of the legislation that will make it accessible to companies and build their confidence towards compliance.